right. The time is 6 p.m. I would like to welcome everyone to the March 17th, 2025 Lebanon City Schools Board of Education regular meeting. If you could all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 on our agenda, roll call. Ms. Irvin, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Here.
Mr. Gliotti?
Here.
Mr. Lane?
Here.
Mrs. Dalton?
Here.
Mrs. Cope?
Here.
Item 4, I need a motion for the adoption of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Irvin?
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 5, communications reports. First one is A, hearing of the public, and we have several. I'm just going to read a quick note. Lebanon City Schools Board of Education encourages and welcomes communication from employees, parents, residents, elected officials, and local business owners in our community. Any individual who wants to address the board during a meeting must sign in prior to the meeting. Individuals may comment on matters concern excluding personal items and are limited to 5 minutes per person or 30 minutes total. Speakers will be recognized by the board president and must state their name and address. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic. All statements should be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question the board members individually. The presiding officer may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, or irrelevant. An adjournment of the meeting can be called if there is a lack of orderly conduct. Videotaping and audio taping of the school board meeting are permitted as long as all parties involved have been informed and that person's operating the electronic devices to do so with minimum disruption to those present at the meeting. The board has a right to halt any recording that interrupts or disturbs the meeting, which I don't think is going to be a problem this evening. So first, Ms. Flux, if you want to just go to the podium. And if you can just state your address, please.
Hello, my name is Sherry Flux. I live at 432 Lakeshore Drive here in Lebanon, and I am the parent of a junior and an 8th grader. I have been a PTO treasurer for roughly the last 11 years at the various schools. I'm currently treasurer at the junior high. I am an active member of the Lebanon Choral Parents Organization, the Band Parents Association, and the Athletic Boosters. And I was just coming today because I wanted to speak about some concerns that I have regarding this proposed mandatory study hall flex bell that is kind of in the talking stages for the next year at the high school. One of my concerns is just kind of the lack of transparency around it. It hasn't been communicated very well, if at all. We've heard of it more like word of mouth from our students, counselors, as they're scheduling for next year. My concerns around that is that, for example, with my son, he does Spanish band and choir, and if he has to go to a mandated 7-bell school day next year with this study hall period, he's going to have to choose between some things. And I have always been a strong supporter of Lebanon schools. I think we have so many opportunities for our kids as far as fine arts, electives, just so many things they can explore, that I would hate to see them have to pick and choose between their passions and these things that they love. And I know that in the past few years, there have been polls that have gone out to students and parents and teachers about reducing our bell schedule, and nobody has seemed to be in favor of that. So I just kind of want the board to be, aware of this, aware of parents' concerns around it. Also the timing of everything. As the kids are scheduling, for example, we had marching band commitment night on Friday. Now, we had to give, per the treasurer, non-refundable fees, anywhere from $150 to $650. That's a concern because if I ended up paying the $150, but if for some reason they cut his schedule and he can no longer do band, I'm out a non-refundable $150, which is totally out of our control, which I just feel like the timing of that and the lack of communication around that is concerning. I would hate to see families losing out on $650 because they signed their kids up for marching band, and then all of a sudden they can't take it because they no longer have room in their schedule for it. So again, I just wanted to kind of express some concerns around the lack of communication, the timing of everything, and just want the board to know that there are a lot of parents who are not in favor of this potential mandatory study hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Next is, I think it's Gus, is it Gus Flux?
Yeah.
Okay. And Gus, I'm assuming you live with your mom, so you don't have to give us
You
your
don't have to give your
address.
address out, minor child.
Oh, he's a minor?
It's okay.
Okay.
I live near her house. You could say. And I'm also against this third bell study hall because I am, like she said, in a lot of different things. And this third bell would make me choose between band and choir, two things I am very passionate about doing. And I would prefer not to choose between those. Not to mention that any kids that I do see with bad grades, all during flex, all they do is just play games on their Chromebook. So I don't feel like this would be helping anyone other than giving them an opportunity just to play more games and do other things, while punishing the kids like me who do so much and just try to experience the fullness of their passions. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Gus.
Thank you, Gus. That was great. Next, Mr. English.
My name is Dan English. I live on 6 Mound Street. We've been down here in Lebanon about 12 years after I retired from teaching school in Strongsville, Ohio. And two things. One, I'm here to back my grandson and my granddaughter, Alexa Flux. Both of them may have to make some choices if, if this thing happens. And I really have to represent the senior citizens of Lebanon. This year we saw a 400-plus increase on property taxes, a lot of us. And then to have opportunities taken away from our students, that's a serious concern. So again, I'm here to represent my grandkids. I'm a track coach here in Lebanon. I've been coaching scholastic sports for 45 years since I started teaching. And this year, for the first time, we're going to have to get ourselves to different meets and things. Two parts of that. One concern is for the parents, and that is if they're going to have to get their own kids to the different events and things like that, are they going to still have to pay the same fee? We used to call it pay-to-play. I don't know what they call it now. Because our part of that fee's transportation costs. And the second, just came on when I came home from practice today, we got an email about reimbursement. Now, it really doesn't concern me because I'm not in a situation where I have to be concerned about that, but some teachers that are coaches may be in a situation where that might be a concern, driving to all these meets. And when I was up north, the furthest we had to go was 30 minutes. Now it's an hour since we moved into the ECC anyway. And so my concern is that the email that we got today said that they're willing to reimburse for coaches up to 1 to 3 coaches, if I read it right. In junior high track, which I coach, they reimburse 2 coaches, high school track 3 coaches. So the other 3, unless they carpool or something, are going to have to pay their own way, which I don't think they signed up for when they signed their contracts. So on behalf of those coaches, I just wanted to say that something has to be looked at there if indeed the transportation thing happens like they say, that we won't have transportation. And like I said, in 45 years of coaching, I've never had to drive myself to a meet or a match or a game. So this is kind of an interesting times, if you will. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. English.
Can I go ahead and respond to a few things? Would that be okay?
Yes,
Is it
sir.
Appropriate to do? I wanted to take a few moments, and I'm going to I was aware that there were some concerns about this, and so I wanted to be prepared to answer those this evening. And we'll start by saying there has been zero communication on behalf of the district. You are correct. Because the decision that was made to consider this as an option is dependent upon the timing, whether we can make it work. So just to give a little bit of context and to let you know that ideally, the high school administration in the district would have had an opportunity to communicate all of the reasonings for this, because I think it's important that we realize that there's a specific and strategic reason that this was made, and not to just take opportunities away from kids. So over the past 3 years in our district, we've been discussing how we provide intervention, supports, and opportunities for students to get additional support when they need it. Our high school schedule is created in such a way that they have a lot of opportunities, but it makes it to where staff's availability to help students when students are available to receive that help is limiting. So if there's a kid that has a study hall third period, but their teachers may not be available during that time under a current schedule or whatever that may be. And so we've been looking at different bell schedule options to provide integrated intervention for students in the school day. As a part of the MTSS program, this is something that has happened in all of our buildings except for Lebanon High School. And so it's currently in place in all other places. We're at dedicated time, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But over the last 11 months, this is pulled from the high school communication to their staff. So the high school administrator about a week ago met with their staff and had this discussion about a recommendation that had been made from a bell schedule committee. They've had a committee that's met over the last 11 to 12 months. They've looked at different options. They visited 4 different high schools in the region that had different bell schedules. To respond to, there was a survey put out a year or 2 ago about going away from the 8-period day and down to a 7-period day, and that was communicated out. And to be fair, the response were about 45% of the community and the people responding supported switching to a 7-period day. About 45% of the community said they did not want to switch to a 7-period day, and about 10% of the people responding said, I'm okay with either one. So at the time, the decision was there's not a mandate to switch, but it wasn't an overwhelming majority of people that said, no, don't touch the schedule. Also, that was going from 8 to 7, taking away opportunities because kids would still have the ability to take a study hall in there. So they looked at different options. We sought to find something that was scheduled that would create 4 opportunities for us. Those are on the board. A time that kids could get help and support. Tier 2 is an MTSS strategy, and kids that don't get it the first time around who need additional support. How are we doing that? Right now, that's offered in several periods a day, have a study hall that has a math focus. So if a kid is struggling in mathematics, they can go to a study hall. It's not available all 8 periods of the day. So if your kid has study hall and they need help with math, and there's not a math study hall available that period, then they got to do it before school, after school, some other time. So how can we provide it integrated where the students and the staff would be available? The second part of that would be time for counselors to meet with students without taking them out of class, time for therapists to meet with students without taking them out of class, and to provide academic and behavioral progress monitoring, a way to communicate with students in that way. Provide opportunities for our staff to further collaborate. Our building is big, and so we have multiple teachers teaching the same subject. We have multiple teachers teaching Algebra 1, for example. And so how can we get time for our staff members to collaborate and maybe align their practices and their things? And then the fourth option for that would be a common planning time or team time. And so instead of pulling staff members away from student instruction, how can we get them available to have a meeting without impacting student instructional time? The only way to do that, if staff is all available at the same time, if the students that need intervention and support or even enrichment are available when staff is available. And so we looked at multiple options. That committee made a recommendation to the high school administration. The high school administration made a recommendation to me. That's all happened within the last several of weeks. And the option, and the communication at that time was, we will make the final decision if we realize that that is possible to do. So they're going to run the schedules, they're going to build the master schedule, and they're going to see, can we give all of these kids what they've asked for, based off of the schedule that we're able to create. So, you mentioned Spanish, band, and choir. Well, the other 4 required courses would be math, science, social studies, and English. That's 7, right? Band, choir, Spanish, 4 required courses, that's 7. There's still going to be 7 class periods for students to take courses. The 8th period is going to be the study hall period that would be combined, where everybody would be doing that at the same time in the building. Not to get too far in the weeds, but we have 1,424 students at the high school. This year, there are 20 students who never took a study hall either first or second semester. The number of students that would impact is very low. And that fluctuates depending upon what they're doing. Those are things, majority of our students in the building, a large number of students in our building are already taking some sort of intervention. And we have a lot of things that we classify as study hall. It depends on if they're a special education student, needing intervention, all of those things. So we looked at the numbers to try to decide, is there going to be a large impact of this? And are there ways for us to work around if it is an impact for a student? How can we work that? So it is something that we were not in a position to know if definitively this was going to work in terms of scheduling, so it hasn't been communicated. The risk is when you communicate things without all of the information, right, that people get upset and they think they're going to be losing opportunities to take courses and to do specific things. We believe, as a part of this committee and as a part of the work, there are a lot of benefits and really important work that can be taking place during this time that we currently don't have the structure or the capacity to do at Lebanon High School. And a lot of our feedback during the strategic planning process has to do with these types of things. My student needs more access to intervention, supports, tutoring, things like that during the school day because we don't have the ability of the time to do it outside of school, whatever that may be. So we think it's something that could be a benefit to us. There are a lot of schools in the area. We're, to my knowledge, the only school in the area that offers an 8-period day. Most schools have a 7-period day, and kids are taking a study hall as a part of that 7 periods. And in those districts and in those buildings, kids are still taking band and choir and multiple opportunities. So I think it's something that we can work through, and they are currently working on the schedule at Lebanon High School in order to make it work. We do believe that the benefits of this type of shift accomplish what we as administration and at the district level and the building level think is really important for the culture and the success of students in the building. There's nothing that says, marching band, for example, is a class that meets after school. And I know that there's a requirement for them to be in a band during the day, but part of the discussion may be that we may have to look at some of those things that we require as additional add-on courses to see in a situation like this, is that necessary for all students? I'm not saying that's what we're doing. Please don't go back and tell them that we're changing that, but I think that's where we begin to look at what are the small number of students that could potentially be impacted by this, and how do we help accommodate those students along the way?
Is it safe to assume that in Sherry's case, if they pay the deposit and they can't take it because of conflicts, we would reimburse those?
Yeah, and
The treasurer at the meeting said no. She said it was non-refundable, non-transferable.
So what has happened is when students sign up for marching band specifically, they communicate, after that commitment period, they communicate that out to the people coordinating the design. They coordinate with the number of things they purchase for each kid. So the only time we are allowed to give that back is if a student replaces a student, because it's a body back on that field using all the same thing.
what forcing them to change their schedule. I
So
think we have to
what they
look at
told,
that.
I just learned this today, but what they said was my team directed them back to Michelle, and Michelle worked it out so that we will treat them as a career center student. So someone who can't be here for class, that's okay, you can still participate. So you still incur the fee because you are still part of the band. So that is what I was told.
Which is what I
happened.
was saying there is if those students absolutely cannot take an additional band during the school day because of this change, then the change we would make would be to look at that, to look at that scenario as opposed to, we don't want Gus to participate in marching band, right? Like, there are other ways to work with students individually, and right now, the number of students currently at Lebanon High School that are not taking a study hall either first or second semester, right, that is 20 students. We can deal with a small number of students that we can make some of those options and availability for. The second thing would be, we will know very soon, because they're currently working on a schedule. The timing of this is, you request the courses, we compile all the course requests, we know how many numbers of kids that sign up for Algebra 1, and now they're building the schedule at Lebanon High School right now, administratively. And so we'll know within the next month or so what the schedule feasibility of this would look like. So I guess I would say, as a result of this conversation, as a result of this sort of being communicated out in some way to students, and I would say probably prematurely because we didn't have the ability to discuss the benefits, all of the thought process. This wasn't a fly-by-night decision, right? This was a decision that was several years in the making in terms of looking at schedules. Then I think it's important for us to communicate that possibility, and we believe this gives us the ability to impact more students academically than what we're currently able to do in our current structure. And so we'll work to communicate that, but it wasn't intentionally withheld from families. The decision has not been finalized yet because we're not sure if the schedule is feasible, if we can accommodate the student requests. So those were internal discussions with the principal and the staff members. And the reason we didn't communicate it is that we weren't sure that we were making that decision and that move forward. Okay? So that is something that I think it was important for me to be able to say because I'm sure there's people that will listen and go back to this later online as well. The second thing in terms of responding, Mr. English, thank you so much for coaching and working with our kids and doing the things that you do. I appreciate that. Ideally, we would not be in the transportation crisis that we are in. The reality is that we can't guarantee that we're going to have a bus available after school for any activity ever at this point in time because we are short on drivers for our regular day. We still have 3 vacant routes that we've been unable to fill. And so any substitute that we have that in the past would be typically driving extracurricular activities is currently driving a route because of some long-term medical needs and things we have in the bus department and the transportation. So we've been communicating this for several months. I sent an email in December that was obviously not well received, but we tried to communicate to people ahead of time. We're doing everything we can, but your transportation may be impacted. I have said to our athletic department and coaches and administrators, our priority one must be getting kids home from school, especially our Bowman and Donovan students, which get off the latest in the afternoon. We're not going to leave kids stranded at Bowman so I can take the softball team to Troy. That is unacceptable in my view. We began looking at options and alternatives and what can we do, whether can we move games back, how does this work? What we realized is in a lot of larger schools to our north in the Dayton area, this was a decision that they made several years ago. Springboro, Miamisburg, Beaver Creek all said, we are not providing transportation to sports right now that leave before 4:30 in the afternoon because we can't guarantee we will get a bus. And so the liability concern is if we say we're going to get a bus and then we cancel and then parents and kids are scrambling, then a kid jumps in the car with somebody else that wasn't arranged by parents before or arranged by us, then we're liable for that student and the transportation to that event. If we make the announcement up front that we don't have buses available and we can't transport students, then the responsibility falls back on the parents, and we cannot arrange, hey, Mike, can you take my son, or can you take Roy's son, and the coach can't be involved in that, because then if something happens on the way to the event, right, the school district will be responsible. It is the last thing I want to do. I will tell you in the room, everybody that's going to watch this video online, my kid and my family is impacted by this. 2 of them. We got 2 kids playing spring sports, and somebody's going to have to leave work early, or something's going to happen in order to get them to events, or we carpool and we take time like we do for practices. It is not ideal, and we are meeting and working on it daily to figure out, are there options and which sports are most heavily impacted. And for example, one of the discussions is probably the most impacted group of this is junior high track. There are 60 to 80 kids, depending on what the numbers are on a given day, and that's a lot of people that would be impacted by this. Can I get a bus, right? Pole vault poles. There are different things, and so it may be that we're able to arrange transportation for a team per day. That's maybe, and that's if the drivers that are scheduled to be there don't call off sick that day or whatever happens. Because when you're short, the impact of one driver being sick and leaving is we're rerouting things, we're doing stuff. So it is not ideal. It is not what we want to do. It is not because there's a budget crisis for us as a school district or that we don't pay our drivers a good wage. We are very competitive in the bus driving market. It is just a field that is, there's a bus driver shortage. And it's not just us. And so, not to promise anything to you as a track coach, but we understand that some sports are probably more impacted by this than others. And like I said, the example would be like junior high track. And because their meets are during the week, they start early in the afternoon. A high school track meet primarily is an invitational on a weekend. And so we have buses for Saturdays, we have buses for Sundays, we have buses for evening events that leave after 4:45. But that's not what junior high track or baseball and softball does. So the other thing is, and I'm sorry I'm talking long, but I'm going to try to, these are all the topics and questions I keep getting, so I might as well say it publicly and have it out there to go back. The participation fees that are charged for athletics and activities have been communicated from the very beginning that they are used to supplement the cost of supplemental coaches' salaries and transportation. They don't cover the total expense that we have as a school district for coaches' salaries and supplementals, the cost to run the program, or transportation. So even without taking transportation, the fees are still not going to cover the total cost of that. So there's been zero discussion about a reduction of that at this point in time. I understand the question, but there's not a dollar amount in the fee that's specifically prescribed to transportation. So it's not like $175 and $50 is for transportation. So that's not how it works. And again, the fees that are collected do not cover the expenses that we have to run that department still, or those programs. So we're not looking at decreasing that at this time. And then the last thing is more specific to coaches. We have a lot of programs that split stipends, and so half of a coach, half of the stipend goes to somebody and half the stipend goes to somebody else. We made the decision that we would cover the cost of transportation in terms of mileage reimbursement for coaches, but also obviously we want them to try to ride together if possible. Carpool, meet here, pick up the supplies and drive. track will reimburse multiple people, because they kind of go at different times. The field event guy or gal, maybe they're earlier and leave earlier than somebody who's there at other times. But the hope in that is that, we would either be able to provide a van for that transportation for them, a district van, or, that they would choose to drive together. We just had to find some way to communicate. Is there a limit to the number of, costs that we would reimburse for people traveling to an event? And so, the communication from the athletic director to them was, try to carpool and do that to limit the expense and, the cost of that to the employees. So, if that's something that they want to address, they can address that with the athletic director. We can talk about it further, but, we chose to kind of draw, what are we going to do with this and how are we going to offer this? Like I said, because there's volunteer coaches, there's all these things, and so how do we know what is a coach and how do we know who's just going along to be there? And so we set that as a meet, get your gear, get the things that you need, and ride together to the event, was the communication, the expectation, hopefully. So I think I've answered everything that was addressed. If you have further questions, I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'd be willing to sit down and talk with you, with any of you individually, that's fine. So,
Thank you, Mr. Severs. And I think I can speak for the board that we're in the business of providing more opportunity, not less. I think all of us take that very serious. And we just keep approving and providing more opportunities for after school. And there's never been a discussion, well, now we'll have to bus more kids. If we want a varsity lacrosse team, let's do it. It's always go, 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 and we'll work it out. I have a lot of confidence that Mr. Severs and the powers to be in the music department will make sure that the 20 kids do not get affected. And we'll take it very serious. Okay? Thank you. Turning back to number B, or item B, student board report, Mr. Parlett.
Mr. McCutcheon, did you get through your whole public speaker list?
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Parlett, I'm working on it.
All right.
It went to a different spot. I had it earlier, man. Now I'm gonna be upset about it because I can't find it real quick. Give me a second.
Wonder how that happened. No one unlocked when I got here.
Yeah.
The doors are scheduled to be unlocked for like,
Are they automatic? Do they automatically?
Is it
Time.
time? But usually walk at 6 o'clock before it locks.
it's well after. Okay, Isaac, sorry.
All right, this is the update for Lebanon High School for March. So first off, we have our swim team. Congrats to our Warrior swimmers. This year, we're sending 3 athletes to the OHSAA State Swimming Championships in Canton, Ohio. These are Andrea Carlson, a junior, for the 200 medley and the 200 fly. Keelan Maines for the 200 free and the 500 free. And then Emma Palmer for the para 50 free and the 100 back. Next up, I want to give a congrats to all the wrestlers that made it to state. First up, we have Chanel Trammell, Andy Addis, Natalie Carlisle, Tara Nail, Annavi Sanchez, and Nick Lauder as alternates.
Do you know, Isaac, one of them finished as the state runner-up. Do you know which
It
one it
was,
was?
I think it was Natalie.
Yeah, Natalie Carlisle, yeah. And back in swimming, they did a good job performing. I think Emma Palmer finished on the podium in terms of the para, and we had good showings out of the other ones as well. So it was a successful weekend.
All right, next up, we have the indoor track state qualifiers. First up, we had Hannah Glassmeyer in the 800, Kendall Huffle in the 1600. And then next up for the relays, we had Nate Cochran, Caleb Nolasco, Landon Tolley, and Michael Strasser in the 4x8 relay. And then Addison Cara Hare, May Panic, Kendall Heffel, and Hannah Glassmeyer in the 4x8 relay. And next up, we had the ECC Bowler of the Year in Lebanon. This freshman Connor Copeland was named the ECC Boys Bowler of the Year after averaging 225.4 this league season. He also logged a perfect 300 earlier this year, which is crazy.
That is crazy. 498 is a pretty high series as well. So that's awesome.
And next up, we have our ECC Coaches of the Year. 2 winter coaches earned these honors, Scott Kober for girls bowling and Nick Hensley for wrestling. Girls bowling won the ECC championship as long as the wrestling boys and girls won the ECC titles, the 5th consecutive for the boys. And then boys basketball finishes the district runner-up after a loss to number 1 seed St. X last week. The program made the district final just 5 times in program history and has never won it. This was the first appearance since 2002. Congrats to Coach Shiv and the program. The next up, an exciting one. Lebanon is first place in the ECC All Sports standings with a score of 125.5. We're 5 points in the lead, and this places us ahead of Anderson and Kings going into the spring sports season.
On Saturday night, Mr. Pantling shared, we've never won the all sports standings. It's a combination of how well we finish in all of the sports freshman through, or fall through spring. So we never won it in the GWAC, and we haven't won in the ECC, and our best finish so far, I think, in the last 19 years has been in 2nd or 3rd place. And so it's just a pretty exciting time, and it was exciting. There was an email chain with all the head coaches last weekend when Keith shared this with everybody. And it was kind of fun to see the spring coaches, add this as a list, another goal for them to talk about with their kids. So it'd be great. It's great that we're in first place going into the spring. We have some really good spring sports, but also kind of a good motivating thing for them as well. So.
All right, and then our upcoming events, spring break is March 24th through the 28th, and then the Higher Honors Lunch is April 4th.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you, Isaac. Item C, Superintendent Report. We'll turn it over to Mr. Severs.
I'm going to go back to the same slideshow we just had there and talk about something else. So we're required to provide a semi-annual report of our bullying numbers. This comes out of our board policy. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically we're supposed to be doing this semi-annually, where I talk about it, and then it's posted onto our website. It's under the Student Services Department on our website. And so it's the number is limited to the very. Thanks for the stand up back there. Apologize, my microphone wasn't on. The numbers that we'll talk about today are verified acts of harassment, intimidation, and bullying in the classroom, on school property, and or school events. So I want to just talk about this. We've had a lot of discussion in the last 7 to 9 months about this bullying report, what it means, what the numbers represent. This is the legal definition put out by the Ohio Department of Education. It's commonly accepted. It talks about what bullying is. And just to skip down kind of about the 3rd or 4th line down there, sufficiently severe, persistent, and pervasive is the key to the definition. And so a lot of people will say and report, and it happens daily, right? My kid's being bullied by this student, they're doing this. And those things are severe. They are most times happening, and we deal with them. But in order to reach the definition of the threshold of bullying, it must be persistent and pervasive, which means it has to be a repeated act. It's not just a one-time thing, and it has to be something that causes pervasive harm to that person. So it has to rise to a certain threshold. This is the current August through December bullying report for Lebanon City Schools. These are the number of confirmed cases that we had first semester. And so a couple things, right? You're going to look at it and you're saying, what's happening at Berry in the junior high? A lot of that has to do with the age group of kids. A lot of that has to do, right? It's a challenging time. The number of things that get reported at that grade level, typically at the lower grades, you can kind of stop behavior because kids genuinely at that point in time, like they still like the authority, they still respect that. You tell them to knock it off, they knock it off. They're beginning to become a little bit different in Berry and junior high. We do see a decrease in things that drop off there at the high school, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these things in a few minutes. And some part of that is like they've learned then at that point in time there are consequences to some of these behaviors, and some of that decreases. Or the students have gone career center, outside placement, other things by that point in time. So it changes a little bit. That's the numbers. Those are the numbers that are reported, and those are the numbers that will be reported online. I want to talk briefly about what's happened in the last, what accounts for those numbers, and to say that this is something that was a board policy that reflected the law that went into effect in 2012. This is not a new decision. This is something that's been around since 2012. And we received guidance from the Ohio Department of Education at that time for the ways that we report it. And that bold in the middle is the quoted guidance from Department of Education. Only report on that report those who have been suspended or expelled. So if a student is given a detention, if a student's given in-school suspension, if a student is told in any other discipline other than suspension or expulsion, they're not going to show up on that report. One of the things that the law also says in terms of bullying is that there's progressive discipline. So a kid reports bullying, you deal with it. The first time is like, this behavior is unacceptable, you need to stop. If it continues, then it becomes bullying, and then you progressively increase the discipline. We don't start with suspension or expulsion on the first offense typically, unless the behavior is egregious enough that that's where we're going. So some of those numbers may appear low, but it's also because progressive discipline, it's only suspension and expulsion. The second thing is based off of the guidance, again, direct quote from the email, if one student is bullying another student, that counts as one. If that one student is bullying 3 students, it counts as one because there's one bully in that situation, according to the guidance. And so it could be that multiple people are reporting the same incident. They were all being impacted by it, but it goes down as one incident of bullying. Because of the definition and how it's reported. That's how those numbers are done currently. We reviewed this year, in the last 9 months or so since school started, our school board policy, which is 5517.01. I think that was someplace in there, the top. That's the board policy on reporting. We reviewed the board policy, we reviewed the state law with our school legal counsel to make sure we're reporting this in a way that's appropriate and accurate. And we didn't do anything wrong since 2012. However, going forward, in the spirit of making sure that we report all things in this report, we're going to report all confirmed cases, not just those that result in suspension and expulsion. The state law doesn't limit it to a suspension and expulsion. Our board policy doesn't limit it to a suspension and expulsion. The guidance we got in 2012 said that's what you should report from ODE. But we just want to make sure we're transparent about that. We want to make sure we're clear. We recognize that this is one of those things that is it's the buzzword, it's the thing that people report. My kid's being mistreated, they're being bullied. We will continue to discipline and address those issues, but it may not be reported as bullying, and it may not be labeled as bullying if it's not persistent and pervasive. It's not repeated, and it's not something that's happening pervasively in their school day. So the last thing to say here is that As a result of all these discussions, we've reviewed our student code of conduct, and I'll be making some recommendations to the Board of Education this spring to make some changes and more unifying language around our student code of conduct from Bowman through the high school to make sure it's all consistent, using the same language. Many offenses that are reported as bullying from families end up being in our discipline system reported as abuse of others. Verbal abuse of others, physical abuse of others, emotional abuse of others. Abuse of others is the catch-all category for things that don't categorize as bullying, harassment, or intimidation by the state or definition. And so we need to do a better way of tracking those things. And so actually, abuse of others is a state term that is used in our reporting to the state. That's why we use it. But not all abuse of others is even bully-like behavior. So it will mean nothing to anybody besides those that enter things into the discipline report card and the discipline system. But for example, one of those abuse of others in the future would be behavior that if repeated, is bullying. So we have the way of tracking, this is not their first time having this conversation, right? That's how we can track some of those things. Physical abuse of others, emotional abuse of others, verbal abuse of others. There are going to be some other categories that we break it down. So our hope is that to be more specific and will allow us to better communicate with the families at the time. We heard your report of bullying. It's actually this, and how do we communicate it back to them in such a way that they know we dealt with it? And I hesitate to share these next numbers with you, but the abuse of others category is really what I think most people would categorize as bullying. My kid's being bullied is the report that comes to the office. If it happens one time, we call it abuse of others, and we deal with it and we discipline it. So the confirmed cases of abuse of others from first semester, remember Bowman had one bullying incident, but it had 16 times that some kid was either verbally abusive to others, physically, whatever it may be. Donovan had 0 reports of bullying from first semester, but they had 24 incidents of discipline that was given out for abuse of others. So I wanted to say, like, to clarify to our community, those reports are a specific, narrow definition of bullying. But many other things rise to the level of needing school discipline, and we are disciplining those things. So I would encourage families to ask questions, to dig in this a little bit, and know that I do think the people in our buildings are doing everything they can to respond to inappropriate behavior when it's reported to them. And this is just one category, right? Abuse of others. It has nothing to do with other discipline things that come in. But I think people would probably think, well, yeah, my kid's, Barry's, it's happening a lot, right? These abuse of other numbers also include the bullying incidents from earlier. It's not in addition to. So
So is the
79.
79 a unique number of students, or are multiple students in
A
there
unique number of incidents.
incidents, but it could be the same student doing it?
Could be the same kid, does not have the same, we didn't tally it in the same way that we did, the bullying report, where a bully is only a bully one time.
Are we looking at escalating the discipline as well?
Yeah, and I don't know all of these. It could be that it's a minor, like I said, the reason we want to make sure we get better clarified in our code of conduct is to realize, to your point, if it's physical abuse of others, we want to make sure that we can look and pull those reports and see how have we responded to those people, right? Did we just give them a lunch detention, right? Or did they get a suspension or some sort of in-school, whatever it may be. Right now, we have a hard time pulling meaningful, useful reports because they're all lumped into the same category. And again, I hesitated whether to show those numbers. Barry Intermediate School has 900 students, 850 students, right? For a whole semester, 79 incidences of that, in terms of what's happening. So those are numbers we want to make sure we continue to drive down. But I thought it was important for us to look at as we're talking about bullying reports. And we've had a lot of discussion about it at board meetings in the last 9 months. It's important to realize that as a school district, we are responding and we do take these things seriously, but not everything rises to that level of the state report. So, any other questions about this from a board member that you have? Okay. And then the last thing that was on my agenda here was alternative school update. I sent the board members an email to explain this. The Warren County Educational Service Center has operated the John Lazarus Alternative School for many years out at the Career Center. They've decided and communicated to us a month or two ago that they will no longer be offering that program going forward next school year for the alternative school. We have about 14 students. We have 18 students there currently. Next year, I think it's either 12 or 14 that would be returning. So we've got to come up with solutions for that. The other programs in the region that operate an alternative school are expensive and costly. So we're looking at those, but we're also considering the option of bringing it back, that program back into our buildings in some way. Previously, Lebanon High School housed a program that was an alternative school program. There was a classroom that was specifically built in one of the recent renovations for that, down by the weight room and kind of at the end of that hallway. So we're looking at that option for next year, and we will be making a decision within the next month because we may have to hire a staff member to help run it. The cost to send a kid to the alternative school this year was anywhere between $15,000 and $17,000, depending upon whether we purchased the seat up front or we had to buy them as we go. So 18 kids at, $15,000 to $17,000. We've got a little bit of a buffer and a budget to work with there in terms of creating staffing. We'll do everything we can to make it as cost neutral as possible. But some of the other programs like that in the area are $50,000 to $60,000 per kid. And so we have to weigh the cost and benefit of what that may look like. So,
I have a
Okay.
question on that. How do they just eliminate that school without, do they survey?
they're
the
a service provider,
county
and they
to-
basically said the cost of running the program wasn't, sustainable for them. And so it's not like, they just are choosing to move their services and providing opportunities in other areas. Part of it has to do with the number of students in the county that need special education services and specialized services in other areas. I think they're going to try to focus their attention in that area. Some other schools in Warren County had previously pulled out of the alternative school. And so there were, not very many schools in Warren County that were still sending students to the alternative school. And so the cost of running the program just kind of became, for them, the communication was, we would have to increase the cost tremendously in order to continue to sustain it, or we move in this different direction. So they're going to use that building for another program. So, okay. I'll keep you posted. I'll probably bring something back next month to talk more specifically about alternative school. So,
Thank you, Mr. Severs. Item D, Board Committee Reports. Ms. Dalton, our Student Achievement Liaison.
let me get this going here real quick. I got out of it and I shouldn't have. That's my fault. That was my problem. Shouldn't have to, but I did. Okay.
Okay. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
I didn't wear my green.
Any four-leaf clovers on there? I'm not sure, but, okay, starting off at Bowman, second graders. And I just thought this was a really good project that they did for second grade. And they were all over the whole school, but they picked a topic and they, demonstrated how from start to finish to complete that particular task or what they created or what they were trying to teach others within their classroom. So there's a real good sequence here that they have gone through, and a lot of creative ways to put the posters together with a lot of multimedia. So, okay, that was,
Mr. McCutcheon, you made the
Yes.
presentation this month.
there you go.
Excellent.
There you
Here,
go.
Reading Across America. This was in the month of February. And then I think it was a Minute to Win It contest or something with like cupcake eating contest or something like that.
It was a cupcake eating contest, and I was supposed to go against our superintendent.
I faked to
And-
be sick that day, I think is what
He
happened.
Conveniently.
He conveniently was a no-show.
Yes,
And-
I'm glad you played along because I'm sure the students were really
I
thrilled with
won.
that.
I
They were-
won.
they
Yeah,
loved that
I
kind of
won,
thing.
and I will challenge Mr. Severs next year. I'll be
Next year,
glad.
Mr. McCutcheon, next year.
Yes.
Yep.
I've been
Yes.
defeated every year I've done the cupcake eating contest, so.
Which shocks me because you seem to be built for it.
Okay, then moving on to Bowman, and this was really great because they all wrote short stories about various topics that they were interested in. But I just love the enthusiasm of the students and also the teachers and staff on how involved and how they got such participation. So it's not just like boring learning that they're doing there. They are actually kind of getting the kids excited about writing and everything's not just on a computer either. You know,
No.
it's creative, which is great. Okay, then moving on, more hands-on examples at Donovan, and then even the next page is at the high school. And these are just science classes, and it's kids working in groups and coming up with the theory solutions. And that's really just what's going to happen eventually in the workplace, is you're going to have to learn to communicate with other coworkers, and they're doing that as students in high school and even as early as second grade. So again, more than just students answering questions on a computer, which is great for communication skills. Okay. Then this is a highlight of the student-led clubs that's at the junior high school. And I'm not sure exactly how many clubs there are, but there's a lot. And what they do every year is a student will propose a club, and then a teacher will help lead that club with the student. But what it does is I think that it creates, organization, leadership, teamwork, socialization, and coordination. And it's just something to get students interacting with each other. So it's sports, it's arts, it's dancing, it's education, they do sign language, graphic design. It just creates interest for what they might want to study in high school and then even on to college.
It's a great way for the teachers to share some of their passion and kids to connect with teachers in other ways too. So a lot of these teacher-led things are something they're passionate about, and the kids get to see them besides just being the math teacher or the, whatever it is.
So
So
it's-
it's a great, it's at Barry, it's a great program.
Yeah, special thanks to the teachers that are helping to support that too, because it's outside of their normal workday, and they're either staying after or being a
Yeah.
part of that with those students. So that really means a lot.
Great.
Okay, wanted to give a little information here on some upcoming events. The first one is March 20th, and that's navigating your child's digital world. This is becoming more and more important, and we have a number of different events that have been related to this throughout the year, but this is March 20th, and it's right here on Miller Road, Performing Arts Center. And two other events that are coming up would be opening day, and our band will be participating in that. And it's great that Lebanon is represented there for the Reds game. And then also some people may not have realized, because I actually wasn't sure unless the name has changed, of this business club that we have in the high school. And let me see if I can get the exact name of the club. It is the Warren County Career Center Business Academy at Lebanon High School, and they have advanced to competition with this, which is in Orlando, Florida, and that will take place next month. And so congratulations to all of those students, because that's a unique club that's going on here. And then, last but not least, April 9th will be our Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and we are very thankful for all of the Hall of Famers that will be presented at that event on April 9th.
Thank you, Mrs. Dalton. Item B is CAC Committee. We didn't have a meeting this past month. Legislative Liaison, Ms. Cope.
Probably the most notable thing over the last few weeks is last Wednesday, Governor DeWine's annual State of the State address. Some things that he highlighted were the state's progress and success in literacy, the governor's merit scholarship program, school-based health clinic expansions, student career exploration, and workforce development training. He asked legislators to support some educational proposals. In this, he requested them to continue to support his mandatory school cell phone ban, expanding Ohio history and life skills curriculum, integrating driver's ed into the high school, which I don't know if y'all remember when that used to be in our high schools. He's proposing that. An investment in the Ohio Principal Apprenticeship Program. He's also tapped Lieutenant Governor Trussell to lead a soon-to-be-announced initiative to promote physical fitness in schools. So that was probably the biggest thing. I last month talked about a lot of things that are in that are still in the work. They have a lot of sessions and things, some work they're doing on some different areas. But one thing that I would encourage you is there is some rules activity going on, and this is a time when people can give public comment. And the thing right now that people can reach out to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce is they are drafting rules for the Educational Choice Scholarship Program. So I encourage people to get on to that site and give comment, read over the rules that they have there, and you can be part of just giving your comments and concerns to our state legislators.
One thing I do want to point out, I sent this communication, is that we're working for advocacy in terms of joint efforts in Warren County. I shared that with the board in an email recently. The other thing that we are continuing to monitor that we want to make sure that we advocate for, and I mean this Friday with Representative Matthews, is under the original governor's proposal for the state budget, Lebanon City Schools would see a decrease in state funding next year of over $550,000 and about $1.1 million over the biennium budget. We're on the guarantee, which means we would still see some of that, but the formula itself doesn't work. And one of the things I noticed in the budget proposal from Governor DeWine is when I came here, this is my fourth year when I came here, and I'm using outdated numbers I figured out already. Our state share index, which is the percentage of the funding that we receive from the state of Ohio based off of our local wealth, property wealth, income wealth, all get put into the formula, and they rank us in Ohio in terms of local wealth and capacity. We were receiving approximately 32 or 36, I can't remember the number, it was in the 30s, low to mid 30s, 32% of the state funding that we should have been receiving based off the formula. Our state share was 32%. It has gone down to 19% prior to this state biennium budget based off of property taxes and the wealth that the state views our capacity to do things locally. And if the governor's proposed budget goes through, the state share index would fall for Lebanon City Schools to 10%, which is the minimum threshold that you're allowed to have in terms of state share index. there are some structural reasons why this happens, and I'm not going to bore all of you with it. But basically, the reason that we drop is because they're not fully implementing the state formula. They're updating the district capacity and wealth calculations to current numbers, but they're not updating the formula on the other end of it, which says how much money we get for educating a student with a disability, educating a student in poverty, educating a student with English as a second language, all of those things. And so we're using several years ago numbers on actual cost, but current numbers on wealth. And so it causes more people in Ohio to the formula to not work. Locally, we're going to receive less money as a result of the formula implementation if it happens the way that the original budget proposal is. One of the reasons not a whole lot of stuff is getting done right now in Columbus is it's budget time, and nothing will really happen until April when the budget, the House will recommend their budget soon, the Senate will recommend their budget, and then they all get together to figure out what the state budget will be. So just something to keep your eye on, follow along on newspaper articles and what comes out. But we need to make sure we advocate for state funding, because if we lose state funding, it increases the burden on the local taxpayers. Warren County sends a lot of money to the state government in terms of income tax and property taxes and those sort of things. We don't get back the money that we're sending to Columbus. And so we have to find ways to advocate for that, so.
Thank you, Mr. Severs. D, Warren County Career Center, Mr. Lane.
Yeah, our meeting for this month is later this week, but the news from the last month is our treasurer did submit her resignation, so we will be actively looking for a new treasurer for the Career Center over the next few months.
Moving on to item 6, approval of the minutes and signing of our regular meeting from February the 18th, 2025. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Oh, I have to motion it first? Okay. I make a motion to,
I'll move. I'll
okay,
move.
thank you.
Second.
Okay, now, any questions or comments? Hearing none, Ms. Irvin?
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 7, I need a motion to open discussion of financial treasurer's reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Ms. Irvin?
Well, today was my official last day of the 6 weeks. My little turns 6 weeks old tomorrow. I can't believe it went by that fast. So she's doing very well. Very happy for this blessing in my life. Okay, on to district business. So taking a look, forecast hasn't changed, so we're still working on the November forecast. I did meet with HR a little bit this last week, and we're going to hopefully start putting in personnel numbers to get the May forecast started early, which is great. So hopefully we'll start having a better idea of where our property tax revenue is landing, and I'll get you better numbers in a couple months. Looking at this part of the year, we are 8 months in. It goes so fast, but if you look at the gray line, that is where we are actually at as of the end of February for this school year. So it's right in line with what we anticipated, though slightly higher, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it's also very comparable to where we were at last year, again, though slightly higher. So we're looking right now at about 114 days carryover. We'd love to stay at 120. We anticipate being around 113. So this is about where we think we'll land based on the current forecast. Specifically looking at 8 months in, we should be at or around 67% on both revenues and expenses. On revenues, we're 69%. So last month, if you remember, our revenues were slightly lower because we had the dip from property taxes. So we've started getting those advances. The board, every January, you all approve that we can get advanced payments of our property taxes. That helps us tide those low periods. So we've started to get those payments. So we're looking at 69%, a variance of about 1.4. Expense side, this is the trend that we like to see. Revenues slightly higher than target, expenses slightly lower than target. 65% of expenses is where we're at, a variance of 2.6%, which doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not really a lot. But if you look at the actual financial reports, there was a higher dollar amount. So this month I went and looked, what is going on here? So one, supplementals happen in March. So payroll's down a little bit because of those supplemental payouts for our sports and some of our other extracurricular activities. So that will hit. But also we saw an interesting month with our purchase services and materials. Those were slightly down. So I'm interested to see how this will pan out in the next month, if this was a timing thing. Well, it's obviously a timing thing, but if you remember at the beginning of the school year, we were higher than I had anticipated. So I'm wondering if we kind of bulk purchased what we needed back then, and things are trending down now, and they'll jump back up to finish out the school year. We don't know how that will trend. But overall, the variance isn't large, right? We're still right in line with the overall number, but on a month-to-month basis, we had a slight down month, which is great, but we just don't know how that will play out. So I thought that was interesting. And that is all I have.
Items C and D are amended appropriations and estimated resources, which are in your board packet. E is a list of donations, and would like to thank everyone. One of them that caught my eye was the historical items from 1947 that were being donated, which I'm thinking is probably Mrs. Cope's first term on board. So that was nice.
I'm just glad he's an equal opportunity jokester tonight, right? Not just me at my expense.
Right.
F is a athletic facilities agreement between Lebanon City Schools and our lacrosse boosters, Lebanon Lacrosse Club for Berry Field. And G is a tax resolution, and then those documents are also in your board packet.
And that particular document is an annual thing that you all get. Once we send them our tax budget, they send back, here's what we will certify for your property tax collections of the next year. And then you submit your approval to them, they can formalize that and actually put that into place next year. That's what that is.
Any other questions or comments about items A through G? Ms. Irvin, roll, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 8 is public records request. There were a few of those in your packet. I need a motion to discuss item 9, our other educational items, A and B.
So moved.
Second.
A is a out-of-state trip, not an overnight trip, and B is some language changes in the special education policies and procedures resolution. Questions, comments, explanations?
Item B, the state of Ohio has a work group that publishes special education policies and procedures. Our board policy says that we adopt whatever the state model policies are on that. So this resolution is affirming that we will adopt the updated special education model policies. That's in line with the board policy that says we'll do this. There were minor changes to the model policy, and typically it has to do with service providers. And if it's a service provider, they're not considered a district of residence. So for example, if we send a kid to a program elsewhere, and what what we're required to do in terms of special ed services comes back on us as a district of residence, not to the service provider. And so some of those things are clarifications. And then we'll bring back additional special education policy things next month for discussion as well, so.
Ms. Irvin, roll, please.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 10, personnel. Looking for a motion to open discussion on items A through N.
So moved.
Second?
And I will just go ahead and read through all these. A is a list of retirements. B are resignations. C, changes in employment. D, one substitute employee. Substitute trainee bus driver. E is a change of status.
So I do want to point out the D2 there, substitute trainee bus driver. All people who sign up to drive a bus originally get put on the list as a substitute trainee, so we can pay them in that way. You'll notice that maybe on the last page, we had an employment for a bus driver. These people are working towards the same thing. And so we approve them first for their substitute and trainee, and then hopefully we get them through the program quickly. We can start addressing some of our deficiencies we have in the department. So it's a good sign, the way people signing up.
F is some supplementals. G is supplemental volunteer coaches. H is volunteers, which we are very appreciative of. I is stipends. J is 3 leaves of absence. K is seasonal workers. L is a list of tutors. I noticed a lot of those are preschool summer evaluation, Mr. Severs. Can you just,
Yeah, so
Explain that.
we're approving people, and putting them on a list. That way they could be available to do something in the summer. Under federal guidelines and state guidelines, I'm not sure exactly if it's state or federal, but when students turn 3 on their 3rd birthday, they're eligible for preschool services if they qualify with a qualification for preschool services. And so it's a rolling enrollment. Kid turns 3 in the middle of the summer, and we have to do an evaluation because they notify us, that they want services for preschool. Then we have to have somebody who's able to go out and do those evaluations. So a lot of these people that are on this list, they are therapists, speech therapists, other people that could do those evaluations as kids come available. So
thank
I
you.
have a
can't wait
question
till
about that.
we can't wait till August to do those if they turn 3 over the summer. We have some timelines.
It says home instruction. Do we have to go to them, or could there be an assigned date or two that those students would then
Yeah.
come to the school for evaluation?
So if the preschool summer evaluations happen in-house, we don't typically happen in the buildings. We don't go to them if it's preschool evaluations. Home instruction is a person that is available, and then, I'm sorry, let's go to the last column. The far right column says home instruction rate of pay. We have a salary schedule that lists how much we pay per hour for certain services. The heading on that would have been home instruction. So doesn't necessarily mean those things are happening in the home,
Okay.
but we do have some services that happen in the home. So if a kid is unable to attend school for a medical reason or some other reason, then there are times where we send the employee to the house to do the instruction, and we would pay them from this rate of pay. Or if there's a kid who is suspended or expelled from school, but they're a student on an IEP, and we're required to provide them with services while they're excluded from school, then sometimes that happens, we have to do that. We make arrangements. It could be in their home, it could be at the library downtown, it could be at the picnic tables behind, frozen custard shop. right? We make arrangements on where those things could be, so. But it's called home instruction because it's not instruction, it's happening in the school building.
But the preschool evaluations are
Yep.
done within, at school?
Correct. And our office, our buildings are operating all summer long and
Okay.
that they come in and do those things, so.
Thank you.
M is 3 game workers. N is some extracurricular aides. And that is it. Any other questions or comments about those lists? Mrs. Irvin, roll, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Motion carried.
I need a motion to open discussion on item 11, other business, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. This is an action item. Mr. Severs, I will turn this over to you.
You're turning it over to Mrs. Irvin.
Mrs. Irvin.
So back last year, the state made some really significant changes to how the board the rights that a board has on property tax evaluation. So as you know, that's our primary source of revenue. When a property sells, that is typically how our county auditor looks at the value of that property. That value is what is related, long story short, to how much we get in property tax. So on some of these larger commercial properties, when they sell, they go in and say, no, that's not actually the value of this property. The value is whatever they say it is based on these reasons. The state changed it so you have to meet there's a very specific threshold and it's pretty significant. The board has to come in and say, yes, we want to fight, for a lack of a better word, that valuation. We don't agree that that lower valuation is right. It should be either the sale of the property or something higher. And then you have to go through a series of, we have to send a resolution to the county, and there's a series of steps now. Essentially, they've made it much more difficult for the board to say, no, we disagree with that valuation. With that being said, you're not going to see many of these. This was one of them. The packet has all the details, but a very high sale value. They're arguing, no, it's not actually worth that. And so we think it is on the board's best interest. We may or may not win, but we think it is worth the investment of, yes, let's have our attorneys fight this and see if we can't get a better tax value. So at the end of the day, we are getting more property tax revenue over the following years. So that's what this is. There is one other one that they sent me recently, which is really strange because this is literally the first one that you all have done since I've started. So this is not something that happens frequently, and now it's even harder to do. So it's big dollars.
I think it's going to become something that will happen more often. It makes it very difficult for the school district to challenge this, but it makes it very easy for the property owner to contest and say, no, that's not what my property is worth. So now it's going to be fought, it has to be argued, and as a board, you're making the statement, this could be commercial, it could be residential. It could be your neighbor that says, my house isn't worth what you're charging me taxes for, county auditor. And so just, they're gonna come to you as they come and you decide, are we challenging that or not? The burden goes back on the Board of Education to say that. I think we'll see more of these types of things. And as this becomes, more commonly used, so.
And basically, when we talked to the attorneys, it was fight the big ones. It's too much headache on the small ones. So they're weeding those out for us already.
So when I was looking at it, who notified you to do it?
So the county gives us all the notifications of
Okay,
complaints.
it was okay.
They notify us and our attorney that we have looking at these. The
Gotcha.
attorney then reviews the whole packet and says, yeah, this is probably worth it, or this isn't worth it.
Gotcha. Okay, I was just curious where that came from.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Irvin, roll, please.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item 12, board comments. Mrs. Cope, anything additional you'd like to add?
I have nothing.
Okay. Mr. Gliotti?
Same, but thank you.
Ms. Dalton?
I'm good.
Mr. Lane?
I do. First of all, I had a list here of a lot of the good things happening, and we talked about many of those tonight. I'd written down the lady wrestlers placing at state, the business academy qualifying for nationals, the community builders last week, which I always hate to miss, but I was out of town, and it's two, used to be four, but two of my favorite days of the year. The color guard had a great season. I think every weekend, past few weeks, we saw, or the winter, we saw, hey, place this and place that. And then attended the Choral Cabaret 2 weeks ago, I think. It was a great night. And then the other thing is, you know, as a local parent and board member of a public school and as a taxpayer, I am angry about the state budget. And I think at some point, the community, the alumni and parents of this district have got to start voicing, this is not right. And they need to call Representative Adam Matthews and Senator Steve Willison and say, you need to advocate for our public students. And that time's now, because it's only we're gonna get half our funding next year if this doesn't change. I'm livid, and I think people in this community need to start paying attention to what's going on. So that's my comment.
My comment would be to echo Mr. Lane. I think it's very serious. Growing up and graduating from Lebanon City Schools in 1983 and moving back to this community to raise my son and have him attend this school, public education was just something that I assumed would always be supported. I don't think I can tell my son that my grandchildren, that you can just assume your kid is gonna get a great education with what's going on. And the burden that we put on local people because of what the state is doing is extremely unfair. And it does, the public and the community, you do need to reach out to your elected state representatives and senator and speak on this issue, because it's not good. That's all I had. Item 13, I need a motion to move into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of a public employee or official.
So moved.
Second.
We will go into executive session. We will not come back in at that time, and we will adjourn the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, roll. I'm sorry. I was going to do roll after I said that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Gliotti?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So we'll go into executive session, and then we'll adjourn from that room. So we will not be coming back in.
No action.
Nothing, yeah, no action will be taken.